Today, we're going to be talking about, for my money, the greatest running back to ever do it.
Take a trip with me, baby, let's meander. Going through so many Great Lakes Sanders. See the sights, highlights of Barry Sanders. Come along with the random Michigander.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Random Michigander. I am your host, Brandon Griffiths. I'll be providing a regular dose of Great Lakes state-related topics in podcast form, from history and events to locations, popular culture and sports, as well as food and drinks and basically anything else that might help you learn more about the great U.S. state of Michigan. We're still pretty early on in this whole thing, so I do want to say that this podcast is available on all the major platforms. And if you know me or if you feel comfortable reaching out to me, let me know if maybe you have some slightly more obscure podcast platform that you would want to see this show on, and I can try and get it uploaded there for you. It's a pretty simple process. But let's get to the main event here. Barry Sanders is probably my favorite athlete of all time, and he ranks above people that you commonly hear get referred to as the greatest athlete of all time, which is really saying something. I don't know that a lot of people would agree with me necessarily, but this guy single-handedly got me into sports in the mid 90s. I would have been under 10 years old, and all of a sudden it's like this guy is just lighting it up everywhere. And I still go back and try and rewatch highlights from his career from before I was following him till after I was following him, plays I forgot about. The guy could just make something out of nothing. He could turn a short yardage play into a huge yardage play, and he just was unstoppable and legendary, phenomenal. And I don't think anyone in my mind has actually come close to being as consistent and having as much longevity as Barry Sanders did. There's a lot to be said about him, and I guess let's just get started with Barry Sanders, who is an American former professional football running back who played for the Detroit Lions of the National Football League for 10 seasons. Sanders led the league in rushing yards 4 times and in rushing touchdowns once, establishing himself as one of the most elusive runners in the history of the NFL with his quickness and agility, despite being only 5'8" tall and weighing 203 pounds. Sanders played college football for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. As a junior in 1988, he compiled what is widely considered to be the greatest individual season by a running back in college football history, rushing for 2,628 yards and 37 touchdowns in 11 games, which won him the Heisman Trophy that year and got him unanimously recognized as an All-American. Sanders was selected by the Lions in the 1989 NFL Draft and had an immediate impact in his rookie season, winning the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year award. In 1991, Sanders helped lead the Lions to their first postseason win since 1958, but we won't get into the Detroit Lions history and how abysmal it is. In 1994, Sanders was awarded the NFL Offensive Player of the Year award. In 1997, he rushed for 2,053 yards in the regular season and was co-awarded the NFL Most Valuable Player award, shared with Green Bay Packer quarterback Brett Favre. By the way, when I lived in the UP, I saw this picture on the wall of a bar that was like some grotesque Photoshop of Brett Favre in his Packers jersey handing the ball off to Barry Sanders in his Lions jersey. And it was, to put it lightly, an abomination, and it burned my eyes pretty bad. Also in 1997, he did win another NFL Offensive Player of the Year award, which in my mind puts him above Brett Favre and probably should have earned him the MVP outright that year, but I guess not. While still performing at a high level, Sanders unexpectedly retired from professional football in 1999 at the age of 31 and 1,457 yards short of breaking the NFL's then all-time rushing record held by Walter Payton. Sanders cited the Lions' front office and declining team production as reasons for his retirement. So he finished his career with 15,269 rushing yards, which put him fourth all-time, and 99 rushing touchdowns, which put him 10th all-time. In each of his 10 seasons, he was selected to a Pro Bowl and an All-Pro team. The Lions retired Sanders' number 20 jersey on November 25th, 2004, and he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame 3 months prior. A year later, Sanders was inducted into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame with former college teammate Thurman Thomas. In 2007, he was ranked by NFL Network's NFL Top 10 series as the most elusive runner in NFL history and was placed number 1 on the list of the greatest players never to play in a Super Bowl. He is considered by many to be one of the greatest running backs in NFL history. Bleacher Report ranked Sanders number 1 on their list of greatest running backs in NFL history. He averaged 1,527 yards rushing per season and just under 100 rushing yards per game at 99.8. Sanders was first inducted into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame in 1998, into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2003, and in that same year, inducted into the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame. In 2000, Sanders was included in the NFL 1990s All-Decade Team, and in 2019, Sanders was named to the National Football League 100th Anniversary All-Time Team. So let's talk a little bit about his early life. Sanders was born on July 16, 1968 in Wichita, Kansas, the seventh of 11 children to William and Shirley Sanders. His father worked as a roofer and carpenter, while his mother worked as a homemaker for the Sanders family. Sanders and 2 of his brothers worked as roofers' assistants to his father. As a child, Sanders was known for having an appetite, being able to eat an entire loaf of bread in one sitting. He would often listen to regional college sports games that his father would play on TV. Mitch Albom of the Detroit Free Press wrote, "All day they would labor, with the hammers, with the tar, sweating in the hot summer sun. You did not complain in the Sanders family, not unless you wanted a good whooping." Sanders played football at Wichita North High School. Before this, he enjoyed playing youth football and basketball. Although Barry dreamed of playing running back, he only played defensive back for most of his high school career. Sanders was labeled as an undersized back and wasn't a starter at tailback as a junior due to future Chicago Bears draft pick and older brother Byron Sanders holding the starting position on the team. When Byron graduated and left for Northwestern University on a football scholarship, Sanders was expected to start at tailback in his senior year, but instead was started at wingback, a variant of the wide receiver position. His head coach at the time perceived that his small stature would be a liability and that he lacked contact courage. Besides taking part in football, he played basketball as a guard. Table tennis and baseball were also sports that Sanders took part in. During this period, according to writer Samuel Crompton, the Sanders family had to scrimp and save to get by. Sanders did not become the starting running back until the 4th game of his senior year, when the original player was suspended for disciplinary reasons. He rushed for 274 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. He rushed for 1,417 yards on 139 rushing attempts, averaging 10.2 yards per rushing attempt, and scored 17 touchdowns through his 7-game senior season. In the last game of the season, Wichita North's head coach Dale Burkholder offered Sanders more playing time in order to gain enough rushing yards to reach the state rushing title, but Sanders declined, saying it was not important. For his season, Sanders earned all state honors and was named an honorable mention All American. Although he was viewed as a stellar athlete, because of his short stature, Sanders received scholarship offers from only Wichita State University, Iowa State University, University of Tulsa, and Oklahoma State University. He accepted the offer from Oklahoma State, of course. Sanders later said that his choice to play at Oklahoma State caused a conflict between him and his father. When Oklahoma State's coach came to his father's house with a letter of intent the day Sanders signed with the team, his father was frustrated, saying as the coach walked out the door that Sanders was making a big mistake when signing with the team. His father was similarly frustrated because Oklahoma State played in the same conference as the Oklahoma Sooners, whom William was a fan of. A friend of Sanders told him that William said Sanders had chosen to play at Oklahoma State in order to hide. Sanders would be playing behind Heisman candidate Thurman Thomas as opposed to playing at a school where he would be the starting running back. Eventually, his father supported Sanders at Oklahoma State and attended all of his games when he played. So that leads us to his college career. Sanders enrolled at Oklahoma State University, where he played for the Oklahoma State Cowboys from 1986 to 1988 and wore the number 21 jersey. During his first 2 years, he backed up Thurman Thomas at running back. In 1986, Sanders played in 8 games and rushed for 325 yards on 74 attempts and had 2 rushing touchdowns. In 1987, he led the nation in yards per kickoff return with 31.6 yards per return, while rushing for 603 yards and scoring 9 rushing touchdowns, catching 4 passes for 58 receiving yards and a touchdown, and scoring 2 touchdowns from 29 total special teams returns. He was named a second-team college football All-American as a return specialist. While still a backup to Thomas, he received notable attention from his opponents. Oklahoma Sooners head coach Barry Switzer, in particular, told his players not to injure Thomas in fear of Sanders starting in his place, telling them, "You won't touch this kid." Sanders was not fond of this as he believed Thomas to be a good teammate. Of course, Thomas moved on to the NFL in 1988, which allowed Sanders to become the starter for his junior year in college. So in 1988, in what is considered to be one of the greatest individual seasons in college football history, Sanders became the first player to open 2 consecutive seasons with a 100-yard kickoff return. He led the nation by averaging 7.6 yards per attempt and over 200 yards per game, including rushing for over 300 yards in 4 games. Despite this massive workload of 344 attempts, Sanders was still used as the team's punt and kickoff returner, adding another 516 yards on special teams. He set college football season records with 2,628 yards rushing, with 3,250 total all-purpose yards broken by Christian McCaffrey in 2015, 234 points broken by Monte Ball in 2011, and 37 rushing touchdowns, as well as 39 total touchdowns, which adds up to 39 total touchdowns, 37 rushing, 1 kick return, 1 punt return, which tied him with Ball. So just to break that down for you, Sanders had 5 consecutive 200-yard games that season, scored at least 2 touchdowns in all 11 games, and 8 times he scored at least 3 touchdowns. Sanders ran for 222 yards and scored 5 touchdowns in just 3 quarters of action in the 1988 Holiday Bowl, a game that is not included in the official NCAA season statistics. When added to his original rushing total, Sanders recorded 2,850 rushing yards from a workload of 373 attempts, 3,472 all-purpose yards, 264 points, 42 rushing touchdowns, and 44 total touchdowns. Sanders actually learned of his Heisman Trophy win while he was still with the team in Tokyo, Japan, preparing to face Texas Tech in the Coca-Cola Classic, accepting the award via satellite. He garnered 559 first-place votes for 1,878 points, becoming the 8th non-college senior to attain the trophy and was selected as a unanimous All-American. Nevertheless, he believed Rodney Peete should have won the award. Along with his Heisman Trophy, Sanders was awarded the Maxwell Award, the Walter Camp Award, and named the Big 8 Offensive Player of the Year. Sanders initially announced that he was not going to enter the NFL draft, but after receiving pressure from his father, he announced his entrance into the draft. Sanders set 34 NCAA Division I FBS records in his college career and still holds the following records. Most rushing yards in a season with 2,628, most rushing yards gained in a 3, 4, and 5 game span, 937, 1,152, and 1,472, most rushing touchdowns in a season with 37, most 2+ rushing touchdown games in a season with 11, most 3+ rushing touchdown games in a season with 8, most consecutive games scoring 2 or more touchdowns, 13, from November 14th of 1987 through the end of 1988, most scrimmage touchdowns in a season with 39, which he tied with Ball for, most games rushing for 300+ yards in a season and career with 4, most all-purpose yards per game in a season with 295.5, most rushing yards per game in a season with 238.9. Even if you don't follow sports, I just need you to understand how nuts that is, like how crazy those numbers are for him to be able to put those up. And now let's get to his professional career, which I am a little weary of actually getting into because it's going to make me sad by the end of it. Okay, so this is his time with the Detroit Lions from 1989 to 1998. So with Sanders being a college junior, he was originally ineligible for the NFL draft. However, Oklahoma State had been under investigation by the NCAA for recruiting violations. On the first day of 1989, the NCAA placed the Cowboys on 4 years probation. If Sanders had stayed for his senior season, his games would not have been televised live, and he would not be able to play in a bowl game. Due to these circumstances, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle allowed Sanders to enter the draft that year. 1 year after he was selected, the NFL allowed all juniors to participate. During pre-draft measurements, Sanders was measured as 5'8" tall and weighed at 203 pounds. The Detroit Lions ended up drafting Sanders 3rd overall in the 1989 NFL Draft after Troy Aikman and Tony Mandarich, thanks to the endorsement of head coach Wayne Fontes. The Lions competed in the Central Division of the National Football Conference at the time. Since the completion of the NFL-AFL merger in 1970, the Lions had made the postseason only twice and had not had a season at or above 500 since their most recent playoff season in 1983. Fontes, who took over the coaching position midway through the previous season, was impressed with Sanders' athletic ability after he lifted 225 pounds for 21 reps. Lions' management considered drafting another Sanders, cornerback Deion Sanders, but Fontes convinced them to draft Barry instead. Fontes offered Sanders jersey number 20, which had been worn by former Lions running back Billy Sims. Sims was one of the league's premier running backs in the early 1980s, and Fontes requested he wear the number in tribute to Sims. Sanders had doubts about what his career would have been like if another team had selected him, such as the Green Bay Packers, who selected Mandarich at number 2, later saying, "I don't know what I would have done if I was drafted by Green Bay. I don't know if I would have wanted to play in Green Bay. I don't think I could have handled this weather every day." As a rookie in 1989, Sanders started 13 out of a possible 16 games for the Lions. In his first career professional game against the Phoenix Cardinals on September 10th, Sanders ran for 71 yards on 9 attempts and scored a rushing touchdown in the 16-13 loss. Against the Chicago Bears, Sanders compiled 126 yards on 18 attempts and a touchdown in the 47-27 loss, but became injured with bruised ribs and a hip pointer that plagued him throughout the rest of the season. On October 1st, Sanders only had 1 yard on 5 attempts against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 23-3 loss. Against the Minnesota Vikings, Sanders had 23 attempts for 99 yards in the 24-17 loss. After the game, Vikings head coach Jerry Burns asked game officials to check if Sanders had applied silicone to himself. Burns believed this was why his players had difficulty tackling him. Of course, no illegal substance was actually ever found. On December 24th, the final game of the season, he had 158 yards on 20 attempts to go along with 3 touchdowns against the Atlanta Falcons. During the game, the Lions installed a special phone line in one of the press boxes to monitor Christian Okoye, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, a running back for the Kansas City Chiefs who, at the time, was tied with Sanders for the league rushing title. With Okoye's game ended, Sanders trailed him by only 10 yards. Fontes offered Sanders the chance to return to the Lions game to gain enough yards to pass him after Sanders was pulled from the game when the score was in the Lions' favor. Sanders declined to return to the game, letting the opposing running back keep the rushing title. Sanders finished the season totaling 1,470 rushing yards off of 280 attempts and 14 touchdowns. His rushing total was both a rookie franchise record and a franchise record for any running back in Lions history. Both records were held previously by Billy Sims. Sanders was awarded the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year award and named to the PFWA All-Rookie team. He was also selected to the Pro Bowl and was named a first-team All-Pro by the Associated Press. The Lions struggled that season, posting a 7-9 record and failing to make the postseason, despite winning 5 straight games to end the year. Which, for those of you unfamiliar with the history of the Detroit Lions franchise, is an ongoing theme with each and every season. It always seems like it should be a little better, but it usually is not. On September 9th, 1990, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Sanders had 79 yards from 14 rushing attempts and a goal line touchdown in the 38-21 loss in the Lions' regular season opener. Against the Green Bay Packers on September 30th, Sanders had 20 attempts for 94 yards in the 24-21 loss in Week 4. Sanders had 16 attempts for 90 yards and a touchdown, coupled with 5 receptions for 135 yards receiving and a 47-yard receiving touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs in the 43-24 loss in Week 6. On November 4th, playing against the Washington Redskins, Sanders had 11 rushes for 104 yards and a touchdown in a game where the Lions surrendered a 21-point lead to lose 38-41. On December 10th against the Los Angeles Raiders, Sanders was credited with a season-high 176 yards from 25 attempts and 2 touchdowns in the 38-31 loss. He earned his first NFC Offensive Player of the Week honor for his game against the Raiders. On December 22nd against the Packers, Sanders had 19 attempts for 133 yards and a touchdown in the 24-17 victory. Wow, that word has not been said very much, victory. Sanders had a productive year, finishing the year first in the NFL in rushing yards with 1,304, becoming the first Lions running back to lead the league in rushing yards since Byron White in 1940. He ranked third in rushing touchdowns with 13 and sixth in both attempts with 255 and yards per attempt with 5.1. As a result, Sanders was selected to his second Pro Bowl and was again named an AP First-Team All-Pro. The Lions finished the year with a 6-10 record and missed the postseason for the 7th consecutive year. On September 1st, 1991, Sanders was inactive for the Lions' 45-0 shutout loss against the Washington Redskins due to having sore ribs before the opening kickoff. The loss was the franchise's worst in over 20 years. On November 24th, 1991, against the Minnesota Vikings, Sanders dominated with 220 rushing yards on 23 attempts and 4 touchdowns, a game the Lions won 34-14. Sanders dedicated the win to teammate Mike Utley, who suffered a career-ending spinal cord injury the previous game. In the final game of the regular season against the Buffalo Bills, Sanders had 26 attempts for 108 yards and a touchdown, but fumbled in Lions territory, allowing allowing the Bills to tie the game, the Lions would still be victorious, ending 17-14 in overtime. Sanders finished the regular season with 1,548 rushing yards from a workload of 342 attempts. He led the league in rushing touchdowns with a career-high 16. Subsequently, he was selected to the Pro Bowl and AP First Team All-Pro Team and awarded the Burt Bell Award. The 1991 season was the most successful season in terms of wins, with Sanders starting at running back. With a 12-4 record, the Lions clinched the NFC Central and made the postseason for the first time since 1983, with Fontes being awarded that year's National Football League Coach of the Year award. Until 2024, the 12 wins were the most in a season by the Lions in franchise history. Having the number 2 seed in the NFC, the Lions skipped the wild card round and advanced to the divisional round, where they faced the Dallas Cowboys. Sanders helped lead the Lions to their first postseason victory since the team won the 1957 NFL Championship game, which, for those that don't know, was pre-Super Bowl. In the game, Sanders was held to only 22 yards rushing before he broke away for a 47-yard touchdown run in which he broke several tackles to close out the 38-6 victory. In the NFC Championship game, Sanders was held to 11 attempts for 44 yards in the Lions' blowout 41-10 loss to the eventual Super Bowl winning Redskins. Sanders finished the postseason with 23 attempts for 113 yards and a touchdown. He would never win another playoff game in his career after that season. Whoa. Spoilers, guys. Come on. Not everybody knows that. On September 13th, 1992, Sanders had 26 attempts for 66 yards against the Vikings. Against the Redskins, the following week, Sanders recorded 14 attempts for only 34 yards in the 13-10 loss. On November 22nd, Sanders compiled 29 attempts for 151 yards and a touchdown against the Bengals. His rushing total against the Bengals brought his career total to 5,202 rushing yards, passing Sims for a new franchise record. Sanders finished his final regular season game with 19 attempts for 104 yards against the San Francisco 49ers. Overall, Sanders was credited with 1,352 rushing yards from a workload of 312 attempts and 9 touchdowns that year. His rushing yards total ranked 4th in the league, and his attempts ranked 3rd. He was selected to the Pro Bowl and named an AP Second Team All-Pro for the first time. The Lions regressed from their previous season, posting a 5-11 record for the year and missed the playoffs after making the conference championship the prior year. During the 1993 season, Sanders appeared to be well on his way to that year's NFL rushing title. However, on November 25, 1993, against the Chicago Bears, after rushing for 63 yards on 16 attempts, Sanders was forced to leave the game with an injury. The Lions revealed after the game that Sanders had suffered a torn medial collateral ligament, an MCL, and would miss 3 to 5 weeks. It was subsequently revealed by a physician that Sanders had also torn his posterior cruciate ligament. As a result, Sanders was inactive for the last 5 games of the regular season. In his final contract year, Sanders and the Lions agreed to a 4-year, $17.2 million contract, making him the highest paid running back in the NFL and the 3rd highest paid player overall, behind John Elway and Steve Young. Starting in only 11 games due to the injury, he finished in the top 10 in multiple rushing categories. Sanders was 5th in the league in rushing yards with 1,115 rushing yards, 9th in attempts with 243, and 2nd in rushing yards per game with a 101.4 rushing yard per game average, with a career-low 3 rushing touchdowns. He was named to the Pro Bowl and an AP Second Team All-Pro. The Lions finished the regular season with a 10-6 record, clinching the NFC Central and a postseason berth. The Lions faced their division rival, the Green Bay Packers, in the wild card round. Sanders, after being cleared for the game, recorded 27 attempts for 169 yards, the best statistical postseason game of his career, but the Lions ended up losing 28-24. On September 11th, 1994, Sanders struggled as he had 12 attempts for only 16 yards in a 10-3 loss against the Minnesota Vikings. Against the Dallas Cowboys the following week, Sanders improved with a career-high 40 attempts for 194 yards. For his performance, he was named the NFL Offensive Player of the Week. On September 25th, 1994, against the New England Patriots, Sanders recorded 18 attempts for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. During the game, Sanders had one of the most memorable runs of his career. While rushing 39 yards for a touchdown, Sanders juked and spun his way to the end zone, causing Patriots safety Harlan Barnett to spin around trying to tackle Sanders. Barnett later spoke of the moment, "I'm not embarrassed about what happened. I thought I did pretty good. I got in front of him twice." Barnett then added, "I just didn't stay there." Against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a 14-9 win, Sanders had arguably his best statistical game of his career, compiling a career-high 237 yards, which is a franchise record, off of 26 attempts, setting the record for most rushing yards in a single game without scoring a touchdown. Sanders entered the final game of the season within striking distance of 2,000 yards rushing, but finished the loss to the Miami Dolphins with only 12 carries for 52 yards. Nonetheless, Sanders finished first in the league in rushing yards, recording 331 attempts for 1,883 rushing yards and scoring 7 touchdowns. His single-season rushing total was 4th in NFL history up to that point. He totaled 2,166 yards from scrimmage, which at the time was the 7th most ever in a season. As a result of his season, he was selected to the Pro Bowl and named an AP First Team All-Pro after the regular season. Sanders was named the NFL Offensive Player of the Year for the 1994 season and finished second in the NFL Most Valuable Player voting behind Steve Young. The Lions finished the year with a 9-7 record and made the postseason with a wild card spot. The Lions faced the Green Bay Packers again in the wild card round after being defeated by them in the previous season. On December 31st, Sanders struggled against the Packers and recorded what is viewed as the worst game of his career, having 13 attempts for -1 rushing yards. 6 of his 13 attempts went for negative yardage, and the Lions as a team were held to only -4 rushing yards in the entire game, losing 16-12. The 1995 season began against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sanders recorded 21 rushing attempts for 108 yards. On September 25th, against the San Francisco 49ers, Sanders had a down game, recording 17 attempts for only 24 yards. Against the Cleveland Browns, Sanders improved with 157 yards from 18 attempts with 3 touchdowns, including a 75-yard touchdown run and a 38-20 victory. Sanders finished with 314 attempts for 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns. For his season, Sanders was selected to the Pro Bowl and named an AP First Team All-Pro. The Lions posted a 10-6 record and made the postseason with a wild card spot, where they faced the Philadelphia Eagles in the wild card round. Sanders had 10 attempts for 40 yards as the Lions' rushing game was stuffed by the Eagles' defense. The Lions were likewise overwhelmed by the Eagles' offense and faced a 44-point deficit in the third quarter, 51-7, eventually losing the game 58-37, despite teammate Lomas Brown stating before the game that a Lions victory was guaranteed. At the time, this was the highest-scoring postseason game in NFL history, with 95 points scored total. This record was bested by 1 point in a 51-45 victory by the Arizona Cardinals over the Green Bay Packers in 2009. In 1996, during the first game of the season against the Minnesota Vikings, Sanders recorded 24 rushing attempts for 163 rushing yards. Against the Oakland Raiders, Sanders had 9 attempts for only 36 yards. On November 3rd against the Green Bay Packers, Sanders had 20 attempts for 152 yards and a touchdown. Against the Seattle Seahawks on November 17th, Sanders had 16 attempts for 134 yards and a touchdown. Against the Chicago Bears the following week, Sanders had 21 attempts for 107 yards and a touchdown. Sanders had 20 attempts for 134 yards and a touchdown against the Vikings, but missed a 2-point conversion attempt after his touchdown resulted in the Lions losing 22-24. In the final game of the season, he recorded 28 attempts for 175 yards against the San Francisco 49ers. Overall, Sanders finished the regular season first in the league in rushing yards with 1,553 rushing yards from 307 attempts. He He scored 11 rushing touchdowns and had 97.1 rushing yards per game, which was first in the league. At this point in his career, Sanders had 11,725 career rushing yards, which put him at 7th all-time, and ranked 8th all-time in career rushing touchdowns with 84. The Lions regressed, posting a 5-11 record that year, and failed to make the postseason after 3 straight playoff seasons from 1993 to 1995, though Sanders still made the Pro Bowl and was named an AP second-team All-Pro. Before the start of the 1997 season, Fontes was fired after 9 seasons coaching the Lions and replaced by Bobby Ross. Good God, I hated that guy so much. He just moped up and down the sidelines. Can't really say enough about how much I disliked him. Sanders was saddened by Fontes' firing, believing he deserved another chance at coaching the team. On September 7th against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Sanders struggled on the ground, having 10 attempts for only 20 yards, but recorded 102 receiving yards and a touchdown. On October 12th, Sanders dominated with 215 yards from 24 attempts and 2 touchdowns against the Buccaneers, passing Jim Brown to be the 4th-ranked career rushing leader in NFL history with 12,513 career rushing yards. He also caught a 7-yard touchdown pass. Against the Indianapolis Colts, Sanders had another stellar performance, compiling 24 attempts for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns, including one of 80 yards. With the win, Sanders became the first running back with 10 consecutive games with 100 yards rushing in a season and became the first running back to have 3 touchdowns of 80-plus yards in a season. Against the Chicago Bears, Sanders had 19 attempts for 167 yards and 3 touchdowns, passing Eric Dickerson to become the 2nd-ranked rusher for career yards behind Walter Payton. On December 21st, 1997, Sanders entered the season finale against the New York Jets, needing at least 131 rushing yards to reach 2,000 for the season. Both teams needed a win to clinch a playoff berth. Sanders reached the 2,000 mark on a 2-yard run, finishing the game with 23 attempts for 184 yards and a touchdown, helping the Lions edge the Jets 13-10. Sanders had a season that is considered among the greatest ever by a running back. He recorded 2,053 yards total, which was the first in the league that season, from 335 attempts and 11 touchdowns, becoming just the 3rd running back in history to reach 2,000 yards rushing in a season. For his accomplishments, he credited his offensive linemen, stating, "Without them, I wouldn't have run far at all." Sanders rushed for 100-plus yards in the season's final 14 games, which was an NFL record, with 2,358 total scrimmage yards. He broke the single-season record for scrimmage yards that was held by Marcus Allen. The record was broken 2 seasons later by Marshall Faulk and again by Chris Johnson in 2009. Sanders was named to the Pro Bowl and AP First-Team All-Pro and awarded the Burt Bell Award. Sanders was also awarded his 2nd NFL Offensive Player of the Year award and the NFL Most Valuable Player, which he co-won with Brett Favre, which don't get me started on how much I hate that. The Lions posted a 9-7 record and clinched a wild card spot as the number 5 seed in the NFC. Sanders and the Lions faced the Buccaneers, who were playing their first home postseason game since 1979. Sanders had 18 attempts for 65 yards as the Lions lost 10-20 in the wild card round after quarterback Scott Mitchell left the game with an injury in the 3rd quarter. On September 13, 1998, against the Cincinnati Bengals, Sanders recorded 185 rushing yards from 26 rushing attempts with 3 touchdowns in the 34-28 loss in Week 2. Sanders had 22 attempts for 69 yards in a 6-29 loss against the Minnesota Vikings. On November 26, 1998, against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Sanders had a down game with 20 attempts for only 33 rushing yards. The Lions were still victorious 19-16 in overtime. Against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Sanders had 18 attempts for 102 yards. In Sanders' final game of his career on December 27, 1998, he had 19 attempts for 41 yards in a 10-19 loss against the Baltimore Ravens. Sanders capped off his final season with 1,491 rushing yards, which put him 4th in the league, from a career-high 343 attempts, which made him 5th in the league that year, and 4 touchdowns. He was 9 yards short of completing 5 straight seasons with at least 1,500 rushing yards. He was selected to his 10th Pro Bowl and named AP Second Team All-Pro. The Lions struggled despite Sanders' performance, going 5-11 and failing to make the playoffs. And now for the exceptionally sad part. On July 27, 1999, Sanders announced his retirement from pro football the day before Lions training camp was set to start. His retirement was made public by faxing a letter to the Wichita Eagle, his hometown newspaper. In the letter, Sanders wrote, "Shortly after the end of last season, I felt that I probably would not return for the 1999-2000 season. I also felt that I should take as much time as possible to sort through my feelings and make sure that my feelings were back with conviction. Today, I officially declare my departure from the NFL." He left football healthy, having gained 15,269 rushing yards, the most ever by any NFL player in a 10-year span. He retired within 1,457 rushing yards of Walter Payton's career rushing mark of 16,726 yards. It has been speculated that Sanders would have surpassed the record if he had not retired early, a view held by Emmitt Smith, the eventual holder of the record. His father praised him for his decision, saying that it took guts. Sanders took time in his decision, waiting till the last minute. His retirement voided $20.9 million in collective salary and bonuses, along with millions of dollars in endorsements. Sanders' retirement came somewhat unexpectedly and was a matter of controversy. 2 years earlier, Sanders had renewed his contract with the Lions for $34.56 million over 6 years with an $11 million signing bonus. The Lions demanded that he return $7.37 million of the bonus. Sanders' agent refused, and the Lions filed a grievance with the NFL. On February 15, 2000, an arbitrator ruled that Sanders had to immediately repay $1.83 million, 1/6 of the bonus, with 3/6 of the bonus to be repaid over each of the 3 years Sanders had left on the contract, provided he stayed retired. Before the ruling, Sanders offered to pay back the entire bonus in return for him being traded to another team or his release. Man, that is still tough to hear after all these years that he just wanted out of Detroit that bad. It was thought by some that Lions head coach Bobby Ross himself may have actually been the reason for Sanders' early retirement, but in his autobiography, Barry Sanders, Now You See Him, Sanders praised Ross as a head coach who had nothing directly to do with his retirement. It was more his frustration with the management and direction of the Lions and the resulting lack of success that contributed to his retirement. As Sanders revealed in his autobiography, "My retirement letter didn't even hint at my frustration because I didn't want to take shots at people as I left. Management had let quality players slip away. We'd been losing for years. Now we were right back where we were when I arrived." He wrote, "A goal that I still hadn't realized was playing in the Super Bowl, and all of the statistical achievements didn't put the team any closer to playing in the big game." Sanders has since patched things up with the Lions, rejoining the organization in a paid role as a team ambassador in 2017, and they dedicated a bronze statue to him outside Ford Field in September 2023. On November 21st, 2023, Bye Bye Barry, a documentary film about his decision to retire while approaching the all-time rushing record, was released on Amazon Prime. But let's talk a little bit about his legacy. So Sanders is widely regarded as one of the greatest running backs in the history of the NFL, being ranked number 1 by Bleacher Report and in top 10 lists by other media outlets. When he retired, Sanders was ranked second all-time in career rushing yards with 15,269 rushing yards, sixth all-time in career rushing touchdowns with 99, and second all-time in career rushing attempts with 3,062 attempts. As of 2022, Sanders is still ranked in the top 10 in all 3 statistics. Over his entire career, Sanders averaged 1,527 rushing yards per season and 99.8 rushing yards per game, the latter stat second to Jim Brown. He never went below 1,000 yards in any of his 10 seasons and has the second most career 1,000-yard rushing seasons with 10. Sanders was a notable bright spot on a Lions franchise franchise that had endured years of unsuccessful play, helping to lead the team to their first playoff victory in decades. At the same time, Sanders only won one playoff game throughout his 10-year career, with NFL Network's Darren Horton saying not even Barry Sanders could pull Detroit out of the playoff snake pit. The Lions' overall unsuccessful play was noted for possibly being a reason for Sanders' early retirement, which obviously that was why he retired. His number 20 was retired by the Lions on November 25th, 2004, along with Sims and Lem Barney, who wore the same number. Sanders was also honored by the Lions when they inducted him into the Pride of the Lions, the franchise's Ring of Honor. In 2023, the Lions also immortalized Sanders with an 8-foot bronze statue located outside of Ford Field. Throughout his career, he achieved Pro Bowl and All-Pro status in all 10 of his NFL seasons. Sanders was named First-Team All-Pro 6 times and named Second-Team All-Pro 4 times. Sanders was named NFL Offensive Player of the Year in '94 and '97, awarded 2 Burt Bell Awards, and was named to the 1990s NFL All-Decade Team. Both the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame enshrined him on August 8, 2004 and August 21st, 2005, respectively. At the age of 36, Sanders became the second youngest player to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. In 2019, Sanders was named to the NFL 100th Anniversary All-Time Team. In 2007, he was ranked by NFL Network's Top 10 series as the most elusive runner in NFL history, and in 2012 was placed number 1 on their list of the greatest players to never play in a Super Bowl. Sanders led the NFL in rushing yards 4 times, second to Jim Brown, and in rushing touchdowns once in 1994. He co-won the NFL MVP award in 1997 with Brett Favre after rushing for 2,053 yards in 16 games, becoming the third running back to surpass 2,000 yards. In the same season, Sanders totaled a record 2,358 yards from scrimmage, later surpassed by both Marshall Faulk and Chris Johnson. By the end of his career, Sanders was known as one of the game's most electrifying runners, as described by the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This was a view shared by Sports Illustrated, who described him as running circles around NFL defenses with an electrifying style unlike anything the league has seen. His 1989 season is regarded as one of the best all-time by a rookie running back, ranked number 3 by NFL analyst Elliot Harrison and number 4 by ESPN analyst Jeff Marin. In 1999, an ESPN survey of journalists, athletes, and other sports figures ranked Sanders as the 76th greatest North American athlete of the 20th century. Although he sat behind fellow Pro Football Hall of Fame running back Thurman Thomas on the depth chart for his first 2 collegiate seasons, Sanders is considered one of the greatest college football players of all time. His Heisman Trophy winning season in '88, in which he set single-season college football records for most rushing yards gained, touchdowns scored, and total scrimmage yards, among other records, is often considered the greatest individual college football season ever, ranked number 1 by ESPN and Sporting News. In commemoration of the 150th year of college football, Sanders was honored during halftime at the College Football Playoff National Championship game on January 13, 2020, as the number 9 player of all time. In contrast to many of the star players of his era, Sanders was noted for his on-field humility. Despite his flashy playing style, Sanders was rarely seen celebrating after the whistle was blown. Instead, he handed the ball to a referee and was never tempted into celebrating any further. He was recognized for putting his team's success over his stats, as shown when he denied a request from head coach Wayne Fontes to return to play in a game so that he could gain enough rushing yards to become the rushing leader for that season. He disliked speaking to the press and rarely spoke about his accomplishments publicly. When reflecting on his career, ESPN described Sanders as a humble superstar. A little bit about his personal life. Sanders is a Christian. He and his wife Lauren Campbell Sanders, a former news anchor for WDIV in Detroit, filed for divorce in February of 2012 after 12 years of marriage. Sanders' brother Byron was the starting running back at Northwestern University and would be selected by the Chicago Bears in the 9th round of the 1989 NFL Draft. Byron was cut by the Bears 2 months after joining the franchise. Sanders has 4 sons, Barry J. Sanders, Nick, Nigel, and Noah. The youngest 3 are from his marriage to Campbell. When the couple divorced, Sanders requested joint custody of them, while Campbell kept their medical coverage. Sanders' oldest son, Barry J. Sanders, played running back at Stanford University from 2012 to 2015 and Oklahoma State University in 2016. In 2022 to 2023, his son Nick played basketball at Michigan State University. In 2003, Sanders co-wrote his autobiography, Barry Sanders, Now You See Him, his story in his own words, with Mark McCormick. He has reportedly donated to several charities under the condition that they do not disclose his participation in any of them. Sanders introduced ESPN's Monday Night Football game between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions on October 10, 2011. In April 2013, Sanders made it to the finals of the vote to be on the cover of EA Sports Madden NFL 25, which celebrated the game's 25th anniversary by beating head coach Ron Rivera in round 1, running back Marcus Allen in round 2, linebacker Ray Lewis in round 3, quarterback Joe Montana in the quarterfinals, and wide receiver Jerry Rice in the semifinals. In the final round, he defeated running back Adrian Peterson to become the next cover athlete, the first player to appear on the cover of Madden NFL Football more than once. He technically appeared in the background of the Madden NFL 2000 cover after he retired, but it still kind of counts to them, I guess. In December 2024, Sanders opened a new car wash in Madison Heights, Michigan. Sanders has been to many Lions games, including the playoffs. So I just have a little bit of a closing thought here as I've been reading through all of these statistics and accomplishments, and I just want to share what made Barry Sanders such a great player and running back to me beyond just being a human highlight reel. So one thing that people like to try and use to diminish Barry Sanders' greatness is to mention that he holds the record for most negative rushing yardage in his career. Well, fellow Michiganders, there are a few easy, often heard responses to this kind of nonsense. Most commonly, a fair response would be to point out that Sanders never had an exceptional offensive line to pave the way for him like a lot of backs did, but I think a greater counterpoint would be to point out that his negative yardage is reflected in his overall rushing yardage. So that means that he put up outstanding and consistent numbers despite the negative yardage, and he still stands out as an all-time great rusher. He lost yards because sometimes he gambled on himself to turn a broken play into solid yardage, and sometimes that was bound to not pan out. Don't let any of our rivals take away what little we have had to cling to over the years with this franchise. We have gone through all of the trials and tribulations. We were the first team to ever go 0-16. Don't let them have that. Don't let them tell you, oh, he had the most negative rushing yards ever or whatever. I don't care. He still did what he did on top of those negative plays. I mean, that's amazing to me. And that is what makes Barry Sanders one of, if not my favorite athletes of all time. I hope you learned a little bit about what it's like to be a Lions fan and how devastating it was in '99 when Barry Sanders elected to retire ahead of a contract year. So he wanted out so bad that he elected to leave, subsequently surrendering money that he had already been paid in order to get out. And it's just so devastating. And all right, everyone, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
Take a trip with me, baby, let's meander. Going through so many Great Lakes Sanders. See the sights, highlights of Barry Sanders. Come along with the random Michigander.